So good evening and good afternoon to all of you. And today we will talk, I will take you on a whirlwind tour on Microsoft Fabric, and we will try to examine as much as possible this new Microsoft software as a service solution in these next approximately 60 minutes, I think. Fine, so first short introduction about myself. I'm Nikola. I'm originally from Belgrade in Serbia, but for almost 8 years, I live in a beautiful city of Salzburg in Austria, where I work as an independent data platform consultant and trainer, focusing mostly on Microsoft data platform products, Microsoft Power BI, and previously with SQL Server and all traditional Microsoft's BI stack. Privately, I'm father of 2 kids, and through football and Barca fan and Messi fan, we were talking a little bit about football before we started. So yeah, you can conclude looking at the photo on your screen. You can find me on web. I'm blogging.
I think you need to share, Nikola, because you're not
sharing. Sorry. Yes, sorry. Thanks. Oh, now it's probably better.
Yes.
Okay, so this was the intro slide. You didn't miss anything special. So yeah, as I said, you heard about me. You can find me on web. I'm blogging at data-mozart.com. I'm also active on social media such as LinkedIn or Twitter. So yeah, feel free to connect if you like. Okay, so this is a simplified, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is a simplified illustration of the current data landscape, machine learning and AI landscape in 2023. So it's really easy to get lost, and if someone gets lost, I really don't blame this person, because yeah, we are all in the same pot, and this is how it looks like really in 2023. So if someone asks you to explain Microsoft Fabric in literally 30 seconds, I would say it's that it brings the value of modernizing this data estate, and that means that users can take advantage of their data regardless of where this data is, and to be ready to leverage these cool AI new features by unifying all their data. And every user can unify their data estate with Microsoft Fabric. So in 30 seconds, Fabric is a unified, lake-centric, and open software as a service solution that combines all the analytics tools that one user needs to support their business and enable AI across their organization. Now we will delve deep and understand what this unified and lake-centric in terms of Microsoft Fabric mean. Okay, so as I already mentioned, I'm a huge football fan, so I will start with an analogy. And I'm sure our friends from Italy are also huge football fans, Calcio. So in a football team, we have players, and those players have different characteristics. They can play in different positions. They can have different sets of skills. For example, you can have someone like Beckham that Ricardo mentioned, who is great in taking free kicks. You have someone who is very creative like Zidane, or you have Roberto Carlos on the left-hand side of your team. So you have good goalkeeper to protect your team, and so on and so on. Now imagine yourself being a coach of that team. So you have all these players at your disposal, and your task is to establish the system that will best fit those players. So in order to win your game as the ultimate goal. So we can think of a Fabric as a data football team. Microsoft provides us with all the players, and our task is to integrate these players into the system that will ensure success. And these players are some already well-known seasoned stars, let's call it that way, such as Azure Data Factory, Azure Synapse Analytics, Power BI, but there are also some fresh faces, some newcomers that should bring fresh blood to our team, to our experienced team, and help them win the game. So we will examine most of these players during this session. At this moment, I would say it is the most important thing is to understand that Microsoft Fabric is not some new fancy tool. It's a suite of individual analytic tools and services that work together in synergy to provide this unified analytics experience. Now you're probably wondering, wait, wasn't Azure Synapse Analytics labeled as a solution to provide a unified analytics experience, 3 years ago or something like this? Yes, you're right. So we now have another unified analytics solution, which is Microsoft Fabric, that unifies one of the previous unified solutions, which still is Azure Synapse Analytics. It's a little bit confusing, but yeah, don't blame me, blame Microsoft for that. Let's examine what does unified mean in terms or in the context of Microsoft Fabric. So it's about a unified experience. I will show you in a quick demo how these different experiences look in Microsoft Fabric. So whether you look at the single workspace experience, single sign-on experience, single storage format that we will also examine in a few minutes, all the way to single experience when managing security and collaboration. So what are the players in our Microsoft Fabric team? This is, of course, a very high level overview of our data team under the Fabric umbrella. And as you will see, you will assume that some of the players just changed their shirts, but their skill set and strengths remain the same. So the fair question maybe at this point would be, is Microsoft Fabric really a new thing, brand new thing, or just rebranding of the existing Microsoft data offering? So the truth is somewhere in between, as usual. To some extent, yes, it is a rebranding of certain services, but there are some features and capabilities that are really, really brand new, and we will examine them and understand how they can improve the overall experience when working with data analytics in mostly in enterprise environments. So this is the unification from the service level perspective. From the professional level perspective, we can talk about unification from perspective of different personas that nowadays exist within the organization. So remember when we were talking about different players in the team, you may have BI professionals coming from a traditional relational databases background. Then you can have data engineers, data scientists, data analysts. So all these personas can now leverage this unified Fabric experience to play to their strengths. This is a simplified version of the end-to-end scenario happening in Microsoft Fabric. So usually you would go and use Data Factory, which is Data Factory experience, which is version 2 of Azure Data Factory that we already know to ingest the data. Then you can use different engines within the Fabric to prepare, transform this data. And finally, there is a serving layer that can be either executed through Power BI or Data Activator. This is brand new thing, still in preview. So I will just sporadically mention Data Activator. We will not go deep into explaining how it works. And of course, there is a one lake, but more on that on the very next slide, because we are talking now about the key pillars of Microsoft Fabric. So there are a few things that you should keep in mind that really defines this new software as a service solution. So what are the key pillars of Microsoft Fabric? First, everything as a service. This means, in simple words, it just works. You don't need to care about the hardware, about the infrastructure, or some complex administration. By taking advantage of this instant provisioning and straightforward onboarding, focus can be shifted to the data analysis itself, ensuring that business can quickly get their results. And in this scenario, the integration and optimization happens automatically. Then centralized administration. The main idea here is to govern one single tenant, which contains all organizational data. So various data professionals across this organization can, or they don't need to worry about security or compliance challenges, because everything is handled in one single place. And the third one, lake. This means data lake, or in Fabric's case, one lake, is at the core, at the center of Microsoft Fabric. And since we were talking about the unified experience, how would that experience work without the unified lake, or one lake, if you prefer that name? So how was Microsoft Fabric idea born in the first place? It was, I would say, attempt to resolve the challenges of multiple silo data lakes with lots of duplication everywhere. No matter which path you take in this illustration, the results are almost always the same. You end up with multiple siloed lakes for different business domains. And then you need to build solutions for breaking down these siloed data. This usually involves a lot of data movement, and even after moving the data, most users and applications are not able to access data lakes directly. So you go and build your data marts, data warehouse, cubes, and Power BI semantic models to serve the data. And these don't reference the data, these are just copies of the data. And sometimes these are copies of the copies of the copies of the data. And before you know it, or you are aware, you have data flying all over the place.
Chiediamo a tutti di mutarsi, perché c'è qualcuno che ha il microfono attivo. Sorry,
no
Nikola,
problem.
there's someone with the microphone open.
All good, it happens, no problem. So before we become aware, data is flying all over the place, and we build then more complex solutions to manage all these activities because of the value that in the end we need to get from our data itself. So there is data flying all over the place. So pillar number one is one lake. And I would start with the question, do you know what is OneDrive? Of course, we all know. Think of one lake as OneDrive for all your organizational data artifacts. So think of all the various analytic engines that are part of the fabric, like SQL, Spark, or Custo in real-time analytics, and all the different applications that are reliant on accessing the data in the most efficient way, meaning reducing the things that we saw on the previous slide, data duplication and data movement across multiple services. Additionally, think of all the different personas in your organization. Providing business insight from the raw data is a team effort, which requires collaboration between various data professionals, and enabling all these professionals to work synchronously is one of the key advantages of one lake. Simply said, if we go deep to understand what is one lake, that's just a logical structure of files and folders that may point to different data sources. So your data might be coming from Azure Data Lake, Storage Gen 2, but also from other vendors such as Amazon or Google. I'll show you in a few minutes in illustration how this looks like. So workspaces are designed to align with different teams and projects, and single business domain can have multiple workspaces. Following this new and very popular nowadays pattern of data mesh, domains are now the actual feature that exists within one lake. Basically, domains provide a governance boundary in between the workspace and the tenant by enabling domain admins to have more granular control over their business areas. And now with everyone able to contribute to one lake, the frequent concern is how to prevent certain users from doing that. Because we don't want official IT-proof data sitting next to some shadow data sources, let's call it that way, right? My take is don't try preventing anyone from adding data to one lake. If you do, they will just put it somewhere else. So then in that case, you don't have an idea if the data is secured properly or how it's being used. Instead, use other features within one lake like data endorsements and data certification, which let each domain certify their official sources of data. With this, official data sources should be promoted to the top of this one lake, while the rest will fall to the bottom. And if that doesn't happen for some reason, you now have the visibility and you can take proper action then. One lake is also represents a one copy for all computes. So far we have only been talking about data storage, and it is compute that powers all the analytical experiences in Fabric. In Fabric, the compute is completely separated from storage. Different Fabric workloads leverage multiple analytical engines when reading and writing data to and from one lake. Workloads will use these to write data to their data items like warehouse or lakehouse, which we will examine in a few minutes. And these data items are represented as files and folders in one lake. And there are no new proprietary storage formats or file formats. All the data is stored in Delta or Parquet format, which we will also examine in just a few minutes. One copy for all computes also means that because there is a standardized tabular data on the same Delta format, any engine that exists in Fabric is able to read the data written by another engine without any import or data duplication. Even the analysis services engine, which powers all Power BI reports, can page Delta files from one lake directly into a memory and start serving reports using the new direct lake mode, which we will also cover by the end of this session. This is a concept that Microsoft calls one copy. So one copy aims to get the most value possible out of a single copy of data without any additional data movement or data duplication. And thanks to this concept of one copy, decision on which engine to use to build your analytics can be separated from how that data is going to be consumed and used. So it's now more a matter of preference. Like, let's say you may have some teams who prefer working with T-SQL and store procedures to build a warehouse, or you have data engineering teams that are more oriented to Spark and rather than SQL. So they can all use the full power of those analytical engines, and each team can build their solution the way they still all contributing to the same data lake in the end. All roads lead to where? If you ask you guys Italians, to Rome, of course, but in this case not to Rome. All roads lead to one lake. So let me introduce another brand new approach in Microsoft Fabric, which is called shortcuts. This is a completely new feature, completely new approach, and this is one of the biggest advancements that we got compared to all previous data solutions from Microsoft. So shortcuts in one lake allow you to unify your data across domains, clouds, and accounts by creating a single virtual data lake for the entire enterprise. So all Fabric analytical engines can directly connect to your existing data sources, such as Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, but also some non-Microsoft data sources like Google Cloud Platform or AWS. One lake manages all permissions and credentials. So that's a great thing. You don't need to separately configure each Fabric experience to connect to each of these data sources. And additionally, you can use shortcuts to eliminate data copies and reduce the overall process latency, which is associated with moving data here and there. In most simple words, shortcuts are objects in one lake that point to other storage locations, and these locations can be both internal and external to a one lake. Shortcuts are independent objects from the target. That means if you delete a shortcut, the target data remains unaffected. But if you remove or rename or delete the target path, then the shortcut will break, obviously. So you can think of these shortcuts same as the shortcuts we have in Windows for our file system. Let's now talk about the pillar number 2 of Fabric, and this is Delta file format. I would say there are at least 5 main reasons why Delta is considered today a de facto standard for storing data. First, data compression. That means by applying various encoding and compression algorithms, Parquet file provides reduced memory consumption. Don't worry, it was not a mistake in my presentation when I mentioned that Parquet file provides reduced memory consumption. Delta is nothing else than Parquet under the hood, but with some improvements, and we will examine which improvements are implemented to native Parquet format to achieve the behavior that we have today with Delta. Next, columnar storage. This is of paramount importance in analytic workloads because fast data read operation is the key requirement. But more on that later. I will explain using some illustrations. It's also language agnostic. This means that developers may use different programming languages to manipulate the data in Parquet files. Open source format, you are not locked with specific vendor. Delta works with Databricks, Delta works with Fabric, and essentially anything that reads Delta is your friend, and it also supports complex data types. Now, this part that we'll cover in the next few minutes is not specifically related to Fabric, but I think it's of paramount importance to understand how Parquet and how Delta stores the data, because that's the format of choice in Microsoft Fabric. And if you're moving from different backgrounds to Fabric and data was stored in a different way, maybe, then you will maybe need to adjust your workloads now to get the maximum performance from Parquet and Delta. So let's start with taking two steps back, and this is how the data was stored in traditional relational databases. So they are row-based storage databases. Now, when we are talking about some analytical scenarios, some of the common questions that your users may ask is, for example, how many balls did we sell? How many users from USA bought? What is the total amount spent by customer Antonio Grant? How many sales did we have on January 2nd, and so on and so on. And to be able to answer any of these questions, the engine must scan each and every row from the beginning to the very end. So to answer the question, how many users from the USA bought t-shirt, the engine has to do something like this. And essentially, we just need information from two columns: product, right, for t-shirt, and country for USA. But the engine will scan all 5 columns. And this is not the most efficient solution. I think we can agree on that. Now, the solution is column store. So let's examine how column store works. As you may assume, the approach is quite different. In this case, each column is a separate entity, meaning each column is physically separated from other columns. Going back to our previous question, our previous business question, the engine can now scan only those columns that are needed by the query, product and country, while skipping scanning those unnecessary columns. And in most cases, this should improve the performance of these analytical queries. Okay, that's nice, but the column store existed before Parquet, and it still exists outside of Parquet as well. So what is so special about Parquet format? Parquet is a columnar format that stores the data in row groups. Now, wasn't it enough complicated even before this? But it's much easier than it sounds, trust me. So let's go back to our previous example and illustrate how Parquet will store this same portion of data. I'll stop here for a moment and explain the illustration you see, because this is exactly the structure of Parquet file. Columns are still stored as separate units, like in previous case, but Parquet also introduces additional structure, which is called row group. Why is this additional structure so important? You'll need to wait for an answer a little bit. So in online analytical processing, we are mainly concerned about two concepts: projection and predicates. Projection refers to a select statement in SQL language. That means which columns are needed by the query. Going back to our previous example, we need only the product and country columns, so the engine can skip scanning remaining ones. That's the same as in regular columnar storage. On the other side, predicates refer to where clause in SQL language. So which rows satisfy criteria defined in the query. In our case, don't forget, we are interested only in t-shirts, right? So the engine can completely skip scanning row group 2 because all the values in product column equal socks. Let's quickly stop here, as I want you to realize the difference between various types of storage in terms of the work that needs to be performed by the engine. So first we had row store. The engine needs to scan all 5 columns and all 6 rows. Then we had column store. The engine needs to scan 2 columns only, but all 6 rows. And finally, we have column store with row groups. The engine needs to scan 2 columns and 4 rows. Obviously, this is an oversimplified example where you will definitely not see any difference in performance between these 3 storage options. However, in real life, when we are dealing with much larger amounts of data, this difference can become very more obvious. So can it be better than this that I explained for Parquet files? Yes, with Delta format. Now we are coming to finally to a Delta format. To put it in plain English, Delta format is nothing else but Parquet format on steroids. So it's Parquet. When I say steroids, the main one is the versioning of Parquet files. It also stores a transaction log to enable keeping the track of all changes that you apply to Parquet file. And this is also known as ACID compliant transactions. Because it supports not only ACID transactions, but also time travel, rollbacks, audit trails, and so on. And also data manipulation language statements like inserts, updates, and deletes. You won't be wrong if you think of the Delta Lake as a data warehouse that we all know from traditional concepts as a data warehouse on the data lake. That was the pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 is lake house. So I intentionally use this as an introduction talking about Delta format because it's basically everywhere in the fabric. And in fabric, lake house is the architecture of choice. Nowadays, you will probably hear ongoing debates, data lake house versus data warehouse. And explaining pros and cons and of each of these concepts is definitely out of the scope of our session, as well as providing the answer for which one is better. So we are examining Microsoft Fabric. We will stick with the facts, and the fact is that the lake house is the architecture of choice in Fabric. And although Microsoft makes a distinction within the Fabric between the lake house and warehouse scenarios, this maybe just introduces confusion. Just to explain why, if we are talking about the storage, we have option to store the data in as files in the lake in this Delta Lake format that we already examined. And whenever we store the data within the lake as a Delta format, that's a data lake house. You can call it however you want, but that's a lake house. Then you can choose between different engines like Spark, like SQL, and so on, to process the data that is stored in one lake. And in Microsoft Fabric, the storage layer is lake. It's one lake. And then if you use SQL engine to read and write data, then we are talking about the warehouse workloads. If you're using Spark engine, we are talking about the lakehouse workloads. I would like that it's simpler, but yeah, that's how it is. Okay, so the most common pattern for modeling the data in the lakehouse is called medallion or medallion architecture. I'm not sure if it's architecture, but let's say approach for modeling data. But I love this name because it's really easy to remember. Databricks introduced this naming, let's say, and even though I prefer sometimes to call it instead of bronze, silver, and gold, maybe raw, validated, and enriched, just to give a better description of what is happening within each of these logical areas of your lakehouse. Let's stick with bronze, silver, and gold because most of people, you will hear most of people referring to those layers as bronze, silver, and raw. Within the bronze layer, we land the data from external sources in its original raw state. So data is ingested as is without any additional transformations. And the purpose of the bronze layer is to serve as a repository of historical archive of source data and to enable quick data reprocessing if it's necessary. Then we have a silver layer. Data from the bronze layer is now conformed and cleaned so that all the key business entities, concepts, and transactions are available in the form of a so-called enterprise view for ad hoc analysis, machine learning workloads, and so on and so on. From data modeling perspective, usually it's not necessary, so you can model data in these layers however you want, but usually it contains more third normal form like the tables. And finally, the gold layer represents this, let's say, icing on the cake, where data is structured and organized to support specific business requirements. Data is additionally refined, clean, so you apply different business logic in this, business rules and business logic in this layer. And from data modeling perspective, the gold layer is usually implemented through a Kimball style star schema. For Power BI, this is, as you probably know, the most important thing from data modeling perspective. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is two types of SQL houses in Fabric. I already touched a little bit upon this topic in the previous slide when we were talking about Lakehouse. So if you're coming from SQL world, you can leverage your skills in two different places within Microsoft Fabric. First one is SQL endpoint of the Lakehouse. This is something that you get out of the box automatically as soon as you create a Lakehouse in Fabric. The key thing to keep in mind regarding the SQL endpoint of the Lakehouse is that if you plan to use a SQL or T-SQL, it supports read-only operations. You can still create objects like views, like table value functions, store procedures, as well as manage permissions, but for accessing data, it just supports read operations. If you want to write inserts, updates, and deletes, then you need a warehouse. Here, although the data is still stored in the same format, in Delta file format, you can leverage both data definition language, data manipulation language statements. So basically the full support, or let's say 95% of traditional SQL surface area is supported in Microsoft Fabric. I like always to refer to this resource created by Christopher Monod. So if you go to aka this one ms and then Fabric notes, you will find many cool drawings created by Christopher, where you can easily understand different concepts related to Fabric. It's not just about the two SQL endpoints, it's also about the licensing, about direct lake, and so on. So I like to point out people to check Christopher's drawings because you can easier understand the different concepts that exist in Fabric. This one is, if you ask yourself, do I need a warehouse or lakehouse? Maybe this illustration can help you come up with proper decision. But in the end, it's not that choosing a lakehouse over warehouse will exclude. So if you choose lakehouse, it will not automatically exclude using warehouse and vice versa. So you can still use both lakehouses and warehouses in Fabric, and you can write queries that combine data from lakehouses and warehouses. So cross database queries, that's all supported in this scenario. And we are coming slowly to a pillar number 4, which is direct lake. And if you ask me, this is really something brand new in the data world, let alone in Power BI. Therefore, I honestly consider this feature as something which is not an evolution. This is more of a revolution. We didn't have anything similar to this in the past. So let me quickly explain why I consider this very important. Let's first understand what are the prerequisites for using direct lake, because it will not always work. First and most important, you need fabric F capacity. We will talk about different types of capacity in a few minutes, no matter the size and power of this F capacity. So you need F capacity or Power BI Premium with Fabric Workspace enabled. Then you also need a Fabric Lakehouse or Warehouse. With Lakehouse, as I said, SQL endpoint must exist, because this is necessary in case your queries can be retrieved by using a direct lake mode. They will automatically fall back to a direct query, which existed before Fabric. As I said, direct lake works for both Fabric Lakehouse and Warehouse. Next important thing, data must be stored in Delta tables. So if you have a data in one lake in other format than Delta, such as Parquet or CSV or JSON, no direct lake queries are possible then. And finally, V-ordering. I intentionally put this small asterisk here. This one is not a hard prerequisite, meaning that direct lake would still work even if Delta files are not V-ordered. And please excuse me, I didn't explain what is V-ordering, but that's, I think, too much for this, let's say, high-level overview of Microsoft Fabric. This is, as it says in this slide, Fabric-specific way of additionally optimizing Parquet files when writing data. That's Microsoft proprietary thing to additionally optimize data for reading. So for direct lake, it doesn't necessarily need to be V-ordered, but it's better because the performance will be better. At least that's what Microsoft says. We still need to check this in real life and in production environment, that with V-ordering, direct lake will perform almost like import mode in Power BI. So to reiterate the current Power BI landscape, the most common way of dealing with Power BI implementation and the recommended way of doing things is import mode. And this is the typical workflow when using import mode. So you import the data into the instance of analysis services tabular, and from there, Power BI reports sending DAX queries to populate visuals in our reports. And whenever we need a fresh data in our semantic models, we need to go back to the data source and refresh the data which is stored in Azure Analysis Services tabular instance. This approach has its greatest benefit in providing really blazing fast performance because the data is stored in memory. On the flip side, the most obvious downsides are data duplication, because we are basically creating a copy of the data from the data source in Azure Analysis Services instance, as well as data latency, because in order to have the latest data from the source available, we need to refresh the semantic model in Power BI. Now, direct query mode solves these shortcomings, these two, data duplication and data latency, since we are not moving any data from the original data source and our users will always have the latest data available. However, and I'm sure all of you who use direct query mode at least once will agree that performance is, well, yeah, significantly worse than with import mode. Let's put it that way. And here is where direct lake mode enters the stage, trying to exploit benefits and overcome the downsides of both import and direct query modes. In a nutshell, it's a hybrid version of import and direct query. So there is no data duplication, no data latency, because Power BI will read the Delta files from one lake directly, but this time with performance of the import mode, or let's say very close to the import mode, because the data is stored in the same way as in the proprietary format of Azure Analysis Services, which is in the end suitable for fast data retrieval. Good. I'm sure you will love Fabric. There is no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, it's not just about the love. I hope you watched the famous movie Jerry Maguire. For those of you who maybe didn't, there is a great scene when Cuba Gooding Jr. asks Tom Cruise to scream loudly on his phone, "Show me the money, show me the money." And that's exactly what Microsoft will ask you to do. So I'm sure you stayed so long with me today to hear how much this new thingy will cost. First and most
I'm sorry, Nikola.
yeah,
There are a few questions about the direct lake if you want to address them right
let's
now.
yeah.
Do you want me to read it or you can
I
see
can
it on
go.
the...
I can go. I can
Okay.
go through it. Thanks. Let me just check. Have you tested direct lake? Is it really equal to import? Does it support all DAX functions? Does it transform to XM SQL? But we still have to schedule refresh delta files, right? Is it faster than refreshing semantic models? Yeah. Okay. So I'm currently testing direct lake at one client with a table of 7.2 billion rows. It's close to import, but yeah, pure import is not an option for this number of rows. So I would say for scenarios that we tested where we compared aggregated data in direct lake and aggregated data in import mode, it's very close to import after you form the cache. So after you already execute a query or two, then it's really close to import. Does it support all DAX functions? So for those things that I tested, it supported everything. But yeah, maybe there are some functions that are not supported. I think it's best to check current limitations on official docs documentation page. Yeah, does it transform to XM SQL? Yes, it transformed to XM SQL. We still have to schedule refresh delta files. Yeah, of course, but that's another story. Is it faster than refreshing semantic models? This depends. So I have to admit that I didn't try like one-on-one comparison semantic model versus delta file tables. I didn't try that, but so yeah, I can't comment on this. Sorry, but those are great questions, really. I still know. Andrea says the major benefit of direct query is that you can access direct that can be too big to import, not importable for tech reasons. Near real time, if you still need to import into Delta files, you're still using these benefits. What am I not getting? Yeah, the benefit is that basically, if you want to use direct lake, you need to have this data as a Delta tables. That's true. But in the end, you don't need to worry about connecting to different data sources, taking care about the gateway, credentials, and so on and so on. So you have everything in one place. That's one benefit. And another benefit is that potentially it's not just Power BI. So maybe you have different people in your organization that also need that data. So instead of also pushing them to connect directly to data source, you can use these same delta tables also for different workloads. So it's not just about Power BI. It's also about other workloads in. Okay, so it's not against data query, but it's just a cloud ETL. I didn't quite understand that. So it's not against direct query, but it's just cloud ETL. I mean, direct lake is a way of reading data. Yeah, we'll talk later, no problem. Yeah. Yeah, good point that Victor made. Everyone reads delta tables. For example, data science that uses notebooks. So essentially, you can leverage the one same delta table in multiple places. Power BI is just one of those places where you can leverage them.
So
Okay.
if I can add something, Nicola, maybe we can say that we can remove a step in our ETL process because we don't have to in a perfect world, if everything doesn't fall back to direct query, we can have everything as a blazing fast performance without having to import data into a Power BI dataset. So we are removing a step in our ETL, giving a user data sooner, probably. And you, in your case, you have a lot of data that can't fit there in an import mode, but you can have also performance very good instead of direct query. So I think these are the benefits that goes beyond.
Exactly. Yeah, great points. Thanks, Ricardo. As I said, this client has 7.2 billion rows. Direct Lake works on 7.2 billion rows, and it's impossible to use this in import mode. No chance. Okay, so let's continue. I think this is also very important part about the pricing and licensing options. First and most important, there are two available pricing models with Microsoft Fabric. On the left-hand side, you will see the pricing list of the pay-as-you-go model as of today in the West Europe region. So everything that I said today, because Fabric changes so rapidly and new features are being added literally on a daily basis. So take everything that I said today that it's relevant for today. But maybe if you watch a recording of this session in 6 months, yeah, a lot of these things maybe will not be relevant anymore. But let's focus on what is relevant today. As I said, this is pay as you go option. This one on the left hand side, where you are billed per second and there is no commitment. So literally you can pause and start your Fabric capacity whenever you want. Those are the prices. On the right hand side, we are coming to the more interesting part, I would say, especially if you are a larger shop and or prefer to have predictable monthly costs for Microsoft Fabric. Similar to the Power BI premium per capacity licensing model, you can reserve resources and lock the price on a monthly basis for a period of 1 year. The current prices, again, as of today, if purchased via Azure subscription, are slightly higher than if paying via M365 subscription, but maybe you can get some benefits through Azure with some one-to-one deals with Microsoft. I don't know about that. On the other hand, current F capacity-based prices are significantly lower than the pay-as-you-go model. You see it's a difference of approximately 40%. So if you keep F64, which is equivalent to P1 Power BI premium per capacity SKU, so if you keep it 24/7 for 1 month, you will pay almost 8,000 euros. Whereas if you have this commitment, then you will pay 4,680 euros for a month. And everything is included in this price except the storage. And when I say storage, we are talking about two items in the storage. So one lake storage, where you pay, I think, 24 cents per terabyte or 0.024 per gigabyte, and one lake cache for Power BI semantic models. Up to 100 terabytes is included in the price of reserved instance. So you don't need to pay additionally for data which is stored in Power BI semantic models as of today. Maybe something changes in the future, but that's how it is at the moment. And also you should include egress costs for data traveling across different regions. Now, before I come to part which shows what's coming next in Microsoft Fabric, maybe I can do a quick tour on Microsoft Fabric from user interface perspective, just to show you how it looks like. If you're coming from Power BI world, you will find yourself in very familiar environment. Everything looks the same from the perspective of Power BI user. So this is Power BI experience in Microsoft Fabric. It's the same as before the Fabric. But if I switch here from Power BI, so this here from Power BI, I can choose different experiences in Microsoft Fabric. And let's say that I want to go to data warehouse experience. Now I have possibility to create different items than before Fabric was introduced. For example, I can use data flow Gen 2, which is an evolution of the old data flow. This one allows you also to add a destination for your data. So you can use it as a full-blown ETL tool to connect to the data source, transform the data, and then load it to other destination. You can also create a data pipeline to orchestrate different steps for data transformation process. And of course, you can create a warehouse. You can also create notebooks. If I go, for example, to data engineering experience, these are here I can find different set of items available. Again, I can create a pipeline, but here I have also different items that are specifically related to Spark workloads. For example, I can create a Spark job. I can import notebook from outside of Fabric. I can create a lakehouse. I can create a notebook and so on and so on. Data science, I really didn't bother myself so far with data science. It was not so interesting to me, but you can see that again, it adjusts to show you various capabilities that are relevant for data scientists in your organization. And as I said, you have Power BI Data Factory and Data Activator, which is cool, but still in preview and maybe needs some additional time to get to it full capacity. So this is the short tour. If I go, for example, in data warehouse, and let me show you just how it looks like. If I open, I will not open Power BI things because I assume you are very familiar with how things are working in Power BI workspace. So this is maybe interesting for someone who is just starting with Fabric. Here I have a basic data warehouse that I've created, and you see here I can create views, functions, store procedures. I can create visual query. I can write my SQL query by hand. So many different things. Also, you can use well-known external tools like SQL Server Management Studio and Azure Data Studio to connect to your warehouse or the SQL endpoint of the lakehouse. And also you can write your queries and do everything from there. So this is in a nutshell how this new thing, so this Microsoft Fabric thing looks from an end user perspective. Fine, so this one is, I'm really excited about this. Looking at the Fabric roadmap, there are many features coming up. Of course, as I said, features are being added literally every day. And one of the features that I'm mostly looking forward is called One Security. Its goal is to let you secure data once and then use it everywhere. One Security, what is the idea? That to bring a shared universal security model, which you will define in one lake, and these security definitions then will live alongside the data itself. This is an important detail because security will live with the data rather than living downstream in the serving or presentation layers. To do this, one lake will need to provide the necessary security features at the lake itself to support a wide range of these analytic scenarios. More granular data security can be defined on a data item once this item becomes available in one lake. This includes tables, columns, and row level security. In this example that you see on your screen, I have security defined on the data warehouse, and that security would flow across any shortcuts which potentially reference that data and will be automatically enforced by all the engines, including business analysts using T-SQL, data engineers or data scientists using Spark, business users viewing reports in Power BI, and literally any engine accessing the data in one lake, including non-Fabric engines. So that's something to look for. And I think, as far as I remember, this comes in, at least it's planned in the first quarter of this year. And with that being said, I think we are almost right on time. Of course, I will get back to answer any questions if there are any. But before that, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks again to Alessandro and Ricardo for inviting me and for hosting me. And let me know your thoughts about Fabric. I would like to hear because it's new for all of us.
Thank you very much, Nicola. We have some few questions on the board if you want to go through them. There's a one that is asking if you know when public licensing will be added to getlicenseready.com. To be honest, I don't know that site, so I don't know if you know something about it.
I don't know. I don't know really.
We don't know one. I'm sorry. If there's someone in the chat that knows something about it, feel free to answer. Thanks. And then I think that there's a question that could be quite long to answer, because I think it opens a discussion. That is from Paolo, that asks about if he has an Azure Data Factory in production right now that lasts 2 hours to complete the refresh. How could be the subscription for Fabric to be configured, and how could be compared an F2 capacity to the actual ADF performance?
Yeah, this is a great and very, very valid question. So let's start from the end. What does F2 correspond to in terms of ADF performance? It depends. So there is a thing that Microsoft introduced with those Fabric capacities, which is called bursting. That means even though if you pay for F2, they will give you, if your workloads require more power, they will give you more power for a certain period of time, but then you will need to pay for this, or they will smooth your processes in the next 24 hours. So it's not fair to compare pure F2 with ADF, because in theory you can get performance, I think, up to 4. So it's up to F2, F4, F16. Don't take this for granted. I'm not sure if it's multiplied by 4 in terms of Fabric capacity. So they will give you the power of F16 in theory during this hard workload. So maybe it's fair to compare then performance of F16 with ADF, but no one can tell you F2 versus ADF. No one can tell you the performance difference before testing. That's for sure. That's one thing. The other thing, so if the daily loading lasts a couple of hours, as long as you don't need Fabric items for Power BI reports, you can turn off your capacity if we are talking about pay-as-you-go option, because I assume that you're interested in that option because, yeah, you mentioned that it takes few hours. If you have reserved instance, then you don't care about the time. You just care about from the efficiency perspective, not from the cost perspective. But if you choose pay-as-you-go option, then you pay for this period where your Fabric capacity is turned on. So even though you don't do anything, you will pay until it's turned on. And once you turn it off, or you put it you pause it, then all the Fabric items become unavailable. So if you are using something like Direct Lake, this will not work. This will fall back to Direct Query. So any Fabric related item requires Fabric capacity to be turned on. That's important. So don't think that you can import data with ADF or data pipelines to one lake, and then you turn off after that. You turn off Fabric capacity, and then you can use Direct Lake mode. That's not going to work. So if you are just using pure import mode, for example, that's fine. You can turn it off, and Power BI reports will work 24 hours a day. You will just pay for this period when your Fabric related workloads are active. Hope this helps. Yeah, headaches in estimating costs. That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges in next few months is to try to figure out, yeah, what's the best, how to find this balance between cost and performance. Yeah.
Yes. So great answer. Thank you very much, Nikola. I see a lot of thank you from all the attendees. It's been a great session, obviously. Thank you very much. Let's see if there are any other questions. Someone is asking if you are going to share the slides with us. We are used to upload them in our OneDrive that is shared with all the members. If you don't mind, you can share the slides with me, and I will upload on our OneDrive.
Absolutely,
the PDF, it's okay. Obviously, we don't want to copy your content, obviously.
No problem. I will then make it PDF and send it to you. That's perfect. Absolutely fine.
Okay, so for people that are joining the call, we are going to share the slides in our OneDrive. You can find the location with in the Fabric community. There's a link with all the slides of all the sessions. Let's see if there are any other questions that are not addressed.
I see one from Fabian. Do shortcuts have an extra cost? No, so just yeah, it's just a shortcut. So data is physically somewhere else.
Yes, Alessandro, that you can do it since you are our social media manager. You can add the link in the link tree. Yes. Okay. I don't see any other question. And I would like to say thank you very much again to Nikola. It's been a great session. It's been an introduction, but you go very deep in many tasks, many in the four pillars, in the pillars of Fabric. It's been very interesting. I think that useful for many of us. And as you can see, there are many thanks there. So Victor is saying that he waits for the DP600 course.
Stay tuned. I'm working on it. I'm working with, but that there's a lot of work.
Fabian is asking if you have already presented the certification exam.
I took the exam 2 days ago. If that was the question, I took the exam, but I haven't presented in terms like presenting like a session or Fabian, if you can just clarify, sorry. Yes, I done it on Sunday. Yeah, I done it on Sunday. We were just talking, Ricardo and I were talking at the beginning of this session about the exam. Yeah.
Okay, so I remember to all of you guys that we are going to have a great session in the next few weeks. So stay tuned on our social networks in order to see which are our guests for the next weeks. And thank you very much again to all of you for attending this session, and thank you very much to Nikola for this great session. So
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.
And see you. Bye. Thank you.